Hey there, friends. My name's Matthew. I'm the C# artisan, and this is the third video in my series on threads. And today, I want to talk about thread data. So what do I mean by thread data? It's just the inputs and outputs to a thread. If we think of the thread as a job that's going to do something, it likely needs some information to get started, some input data, and when it's all done, probably we're going to read out some kind of results of some sort. So that's it. Let's dive into the code, start some threads, passing in some data, and reading out the results. Here we are back in our demo project, and I've added a new class called ThreadTest_with_data. And let's begin with a wrapper function called runThreadWithData. And as we did in our original thread test, I would like to log the fact that we are entering and exiting these functions. Now, when we created the thread in our basic run one thread test, we used a delegate called a thread start delegate. In this one, today, we're going to use the parameterized thread start delegate, and that looks like this. Private, static, void, and we can use the same name, thread proc. The only difference is that it has this input parameter of an object. So this qualifies as a parameterized thread start. So now we can say thread t equals new, giving it our thread proc. And then when we start the thread, we can give it an object. And I'll just pass in the number 42. Why not? And then we can join the thread, which, as I said before, this blocks the main thread here while the worker thread does its work. The last thing we need to do is implement our worker thread proc. So once again, let's log the fact that we are entering and exiting the function. And here in the entering message, I'm also going to include the fact that we have some data. So we can include with data of object in our message. And I guess we will simply use our simulated jobs to do something blocking for 2 seconds. That should be good enough. Okay, so to review, we're going to create a thread using our parameterized thread start delegate. And then we will start the thread passing in some arbitrary data here, an object, which we will then log out from within our thread proc. So all that's left to do is modify the program so that it launches our new test function. I think that should do the trick. Let's build it. It builds, it runs, and it came up. And we'll press enter to start. Okay, now you can see it. The master thread, the main thread, started run thread with data, and here's our worker thread entering thread proc with data 42, and then everything runs as expected. So that's really all there is to it for passing data into a thread. Of course, in the real world, you probably, you might want to pass something more than just an integer. So let's create a little data class. And I'm going to implement these properties explicitly, backed with private member variables, instead of using auto properties. And you'll see why in the next video when we talk about thread safety. So we can do private int some number and private string some string, and then let's expose these with properties. That looks right, and public string. Okay, and I think that is right. So now we have our little data class with two properties. And here, when we start the thread, we'll just make some thread data. And we can say some number is 42 and some string equals blue. That seems good enough. And now instead of passing the number 42 to our thread, we will pass data. So this creates a little problem here because we don't want to just format the object. We want to use our object. So to get at the actual object and make the code clear, we will cast the input to the correct type. And now we can say data dot some number and data dot some string. Again, to recap, we've just created a data class. We instantiated one of these, passed it to our thread, and our thread is logging out what it got. So let's run that and see how this looks. All right, so 42 blue went in. Now, let's imagine that the thread proc is actually going to modify these values. So after it does something blocking, let's say it does data.SumNumber equals 99. And data.SumString now equals green. So we've got some modified result. Back here in our controlling thread, let's log that information also. So the values after the thread completes are the number and some string. So again, just to recap, we're passing some data in. The thread proc itself is going to modify those values, and then the main thread is going to read them back out as a result. So let's run this. Press enter to start. And the input data was 42 blue, and after the thread completes, we have 99 green. Voila, data in, data out. Now, as you look at this, you might start thinking, doesn't this raise some questions about thread safety? I mean, is this okay? We've got our main thread and our worker thread both kind of operating on the same data. Is that going to be safe? So in the next video, we're going to dig into this very interesting topic of thread safety and explain a few ways in which you can handle that problem. Hey there, C# friends. Are you enjoying these videos and finding them helpful? I hope so. And if you are, please go ahead and like the video on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and feel free to leave a comment. I would love to hear from you.